Hi, I'm Justin Grant, Head of Communications for Advancing Black Pathways at JPMorgan Chase, a bold initiative aimed at helping the Black community close historical gaps in wealth creation, educational achievement, and long-term career success. Today, I'm excited to be joined by both Tiki Barber, formerly of my hometown New York Giants, a thriving businessman and father of six, and Barry Simmons, Managing Director and Head of the East Division for Chase Wealth Management. We're here today to talk about a critical issue for Black men: how to amass wealth, build a legacy, and position our families to thrive for generations. And as we begin this conversation, we must acknowledge the racial wealth gap in this country that continues to widen. Black families today possess only 1/10 of the wealth that white families enjoy. And if we don't reverse these trends, the median wealth for Black families is on track to fall to zero by 2053. But on a more hopeful note, some of us are starting to break through and position our families to thrive. And long-term financial planning is at the core of this. So Tiki, let's start with your journey. Just looking back on what you've accomplished so far in life, the list is long. You've led a successful NFL career, you've established yourself as a successful businessman. And many folks on the line, they might be more familiar with your NFL career, but I'd love to spend some time on the here and the now. What have you been up to these days?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I appreciate you having me, Justin and Barry. It's always great to see former teammate and fellow Wahoo. Wahoo Wah, let's go. But you know,
Ahua.
back to your point about starting on that next level and pushing yourself to that next plateau. I have to acknowledge that I was given a little bit of an advantage because I played in the National Football League, and you immediately raise your floor when you get an opportunity like that. But from there, it's about embracing opportunities, and that's what I've all done since I came to New York. Currently, there's a lot of things going on. I have my foot still in sports. I do a national radio show on CBS Sports Radio and CBS Sports Network, talking all things NFL, basketball, baseball, etc. But I've also started a company. It's called Thuzio, and we've had many iterations. We've turned many corners and evolved into really two businesses now. One is called Julius, which is an influencer marketing company that allows brands to find the perfect influencer for their campaign. And the second one is Thuzio, which is an event business. The COVID pandemic has challenged us pretty significantly, but by technology, just like we are on this Zoom call, we've been able to grow our business by doing virtual events over the last 4 or 5 months. And so it's been an eye-opening experience, but something that's kept us really busy and engaged. Outside of that, I am always looking for the next thing. And a lot of it is in media. Right now, there's an endeavor that me and a couple of partners are working on called New HD Media, which is, I hope, a chance for me to give myself a greater voice as an African American, those with minorities or other disabilities to have a greater voice. And so I'm always moving in different directions and finding new projects to get involved in.
That's great, Tiki. And, it's no secret that when you talk about pro athletes, many of them struggle to sustain their wealth after their careers are over. We've seen many cases of this. When did you realize that you were going to need professional help managing money and your resources?
So this is all on Mama Barber. So just a quick story. When me and Rondé, I have a twin brother, for those who don't know, an identical twin who also played at the University of Virginia with me. When me and my twin went to UVA, my mother went to college to get her MBA. So she went back to college to get her master's in business administration with a concentration in finance. And so she would call us all the time, like, I'm making straight A's. What are you guys doing? So there's always this like competitiveness in our family. That was part of it. But when we got close to becoming NFL players, we kind of started to know that this was going to be our path. My mother started interviewing financial advisors. I was 21 years old. I mean, I didn't know. I was just like, I'm going to the NFL, I'm going to the league. I don't know what I'm doing. My mother started interviewing financial advisors and hired our financial advisor before I ever hired an agent. And so I knew early that I was going to need financial assistance. And it's been one of the greatest things. I'm still with that group too, by the way. I'm 25 5 years later. It's one of those things that changed the course of my life in a personal and financial way. But it started with my mom. And so again, I'll go back to the advantages that I've been given. One, because I landed in the National Football League, but two, I had a mother who took education very seriously and gave me the pushes and the leg up that I think a lot of athletes sometimes don't have.
No, that's a fair point. And you think about the backgrounds of a lot of these athletes. Many of them come from
That's right.
city single parent homes. So a lot of us are behind the eight ball, alluding to that racial wealth gap. Now, Barry, we've seen a lot happening in the labor market this year. This is one of the most difficult job markets on record. Global growth is down significantly. And for many of us, this has meant either a pause or a change in our jobs, really complete shift in how a lot of us have to make money. What are some of the financial considerations for people who've had to make a transition or jump to a new industry in this environment?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, again, it's great to be here and always great to see Tiki, my good friend from UVA, and Justin. It's a great question, but it all starts with the budget. And you really have to make sure that you're focusing on that financial plan, and it's never too early to start. I love what Tiki talked about early as his 20s and his mother talking about you need to have a plan, you need to have a financial advisor. Too often we wait to make a financial plan and a budget until we get the money. We actually need to start planning as soon as we can and as early as we can, because you're never too young to start building that financial plan. And given these times of uncertainty, Justin, I think it's even more important now because people may be taking jobs where they may have less income coming in. So what we need to do is we need to start to adjust for that today. Start planning to build your budget, your spending, your allocation based on the funds that you are going to be receiving, not what you may have had in the past. And too often, as Tiki probably has seen, we have athletes or people who have large salaries. When that income starts to dissipate, they take too long to adjust to the budget and managing on what they have and what is coming in today versus what they had and what was coming in the past. And that's where the financial problems start to happen. So when you think about this pandemic and the time that we have today, we have to make sure that we adjust for that, because ultimately our people need to move forward as we sustain that wealth and build that budget.
Yep. I think another thing, just to add, Barry, and I see this in athletics. I see it often in athletics. It's your budget, not the guy next to you's budget, who's been in the league for or been in an industry or business for a decade and has plenty of disposable income and is buying a BMW. Right? Just because he is doesn't mean that you should. It's focusing in on your budget, not someone else's budget, and trying to keep up with the Joneses. I can't tell how many times I saw these young players when I was in the NFL, and I had been around 5 or 6, 7 years, and they're buying a better car than I have. I'm like, right. I know you don't have the money to afford that, and you think you're going to make it forever, and that's not necessarily the case.
Absolutely.
That's an excellent transition to our next question. Part of your financial journey is about learning, and learning involves making mistakes. I remember when I was a freshman in college, and you see the credit card companies on campus. You don't know a thing about managing a credit card. I went and signed up and, had to clean up that mess when I was a kid. That was my big mistake. What's been your biggest money mistake and the lesson that you took from it?
Yeah, so probably the worst mistake I made personally financially. There's different business mistakes that you make along the way. But I think the worst mistake I made personally was I bought a very expensive apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. I mean, it was over $6 million. I'd been around for a long time, but the timing was wrong in the market, and I didn't look at the market. I didn't look at the economic trends. I didn't look at what was potentially coming forward a year or 2 years from now. And obviously, we know what happened in 2008. The world corrected itself. For those who don't want to say it crashed, it corrected itself, and I started to lose a lot there. And on top of that, I went through a divorce 2 years later. And so it compounded, like everything just started compounding and compounding. And it's easy to get get caught. So I think the worst mistake I made was thinking that timing didn't matter. Timing absolutely matters when you're making large purchases like that. Now, we ended up ultimately getting out of it okay, but we didn't nearly make the return that we probably should have on a big apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan.
And everybody has a different financial journey. And one of the themes that we hear about in the wealth management world is this idea of having an accountability partner, a money mentor, an advisor. Having somebody to connect with can just be so powerful in helping people achieve their goals. And I know that you and Barry have a strong advisor-client relationship. Talk about your process, Tiki, in finding an advisor, and what was important to you as you went about that search?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that was of paramount to me, and this is obviously finding one we found right away, as I told you with my mother, but then managing that relationship as my life changed and evolved. So when I come into the National Football League, I have $1 million signing bonus, and I'm living this certain life by myself, like not married, no kids. It's different than 4 years later or 5 years later. I'm now married for a couple of years. I have one kid and another one on the way, and your expectations are changing and your needs are changing. I mean, one of the greatest things I ever did was start a 529 when my oldest son, who's now 18, was born, and it became important. He's a good athlete, and I would hope he's going to get an athletic scholarship. But you know what? He chose to go to Princeton, so they don't give athletic scholarships. So thank goodness I set aside a 529 so that 20 almost 15 years after I'm retired, I'm not pulling out of my pocket to pay for him to go to one of the prestigious Ivy League schools here in the Northeast. And so I think that conversation started to evolve once I had kids. And I think that's one of the most important things. It's one thing to hire a financial advisor. It's another to stay in a real relationship with them, not just like, all right, send me the monthly or the weekly or the yearly update on how my portfolio is doing. This is changing for me. I told you I went through a divorce. It changed for me significantly. I had 2 more kids with my second wife, and now I have 6. And so that evolution is so important when you're thinking about hiring a financial advisor, because it's about the relationship. If it's someone you don't mesh with, you can't have a business with them.
And Barry, for the person that's listening to this that might not have a connection to an advisor, how do you recommend they go about searching for one?
Listen, those points that Tiki just made are so important. You have such great access to financial advisory nowadays. You can go into a local branch and you can talk and reach out to some of the bankers there and ask for a financial advisor. We have branches at JPMorgan Chase across the country where you have access to that wealth management knowledge, but you also have online access. You see many online platforms nowadays where you can reach out and get that financial advice. But I do want to really hone in on something that Tiki said, which is really important. You have to find an advisor that works for you. You absolutely have to build a relationship. This isn't a transactional relationship. It is a business relationship. And as your wealth evolves and changes over time, that advisor's got to be with you over time to ensure that they are helping you continue to grow your wealth. And think about it like a doctor's relationship. When you find a doctor, sometimes there may be a doctor you just don't mesh with, but you don't not find a doctor. You just go to the next one until you figure out who you work well with that is going to help you feel better and move forward. It's the same thing with financial advice. You may not mesh like Tiki talked about with everyone, but you do not stop looking for that advisor. You have to continue to build that relationship with someone that you can trust, that you can relate to, and then ultimately understands what your goals and objectives are, and you're moving forward on the same page to build that wealth, to prepare for those unintended circumstances or needs, whether it be paying for college, vacation, retirement, but it's about the goals. And too many people, I think nowadays, Justin, they think about wealth management and advisory as stock picking or transactional, but it's really not. It's about achieving your life goals and building a plan to be able to achieve those goals over time and over a duration of period. It's not a transactional thing. It's a lifelong thing. And I think you've seen and heard from Tiki, it absolutely is important that you build a relationship with somebody where you're aligned and on the same page.
No, I completely agree with that. And Tiki, you mentioned the impact that your mom had on your life. Your financial philosophy wouldn't be what it is without your mom. Let's think about some of the advice that you've gotten in managing your money along the way. What's the best advice that you've gotten so far when it comes to?
It's interesting. Some of the best advice happened from my wife, came from my second wife, Tracy, because I used to not think in real time about a paycheck that comes in and what I'm doing with it. I just put it in the bank account, and then eventually, after it accumulates a certain amount, we transfer it over to our financial advisor. But she would always, take just a little piece of it, whether it's 10% or 20%, and just kind of stick it aside and put it into savings. And over time, you go look at that account, and it's like, wow, we saved a lot of money just by taking a little piece of a little paycheck, right? Or a big paycheck, doesn't matter. Just take a little piece of it and save. I think the biggest thing that we have done, the greatest advice I've got, it came from Tracy, my wife, who said, yes, you're making a lot of money right now because you're doing so many different things, but you always have to save. And I think sometimes there's sacrifice that comes in that, like something you want to buy or a vacation you want to go on, and you end up not doing that. But saving has saved us as we got to this crazy transition in the world because of the coronavirus, because these additional income streams that used to come in. Hey, Teak, you want to come to this event and do this appearance? You want to, go do this or that and the other? They're done. They dried up. But because we had been saving, we're not rushed. Like we don't feel like we're behind in our budget. And so the best advice I've gotten is save, even when you don't need to. Probably more importantly, when you don't need to, you should save.
No, that's fantastic advice. And as we talk about money management and building our assets so we can live the life that we want, that's what this is really all about ultimately. Mm-hmm. The topic of entrepreneurship often comes up. At Tiki, after your NFL career, you dove into entrepreneurship, and today you mentioned you're involved in a number of ventures. Talk about the role of your NFL career in helping you to launch these ventures.
Yeah, well, directly, my NFL career helped launch these ventures. And the first one was a failure because it was with Steve Ross of Related Companies. He's the owner of the Miami Dolphins. He has a huge commercial and affordable housing business. And when I retired from the NFL, real estate just felt right for me because I lived in New York City. I knew all of these real estate developers. I had been able to walk in these circles that I probably didn't belong in, but because I was a football player, but I was cool, And so I was able to make some relationships with a lot of these folks. And Steve was buying a portfolio based out of my hometown. It was a huge portfolio of 36 properties in affordable housing. And he wanted me to help him purchase these. And so we formed a company, and we jointly went in and bought this portfolio, and then the market corrected itself that I was alluding to earlier. And we were on the hook for a significant loss because we were going to default on all of these deals that we were trying to make. Tax credit equity had fallen from 97 cents on the dollar to 60-something cents on the dollar. Nobody was lending, so there was no debt, there was no equity. We were stuck. Steve, blessedly, let us out of the deal, and he personally guaranteed it himself. But it was a lesson in timing, but it also was a lesson in developing and earning relationships through difficult times. Fast forward 3 years later, when I started Thuzio, our seed money was Steve Ross. And so the relationships matter so much when you want to be an entrepreneur, when you're looking to do something. You can't have pride and ownership like, this is mine, this is the way we're going to do it, this is the only way we're going to do it. You got to take advice, and you got to partner well. Otherwise, once those missteps happen or those potential failures start to happen, you're on your own as well. So I think the relationships have been one of the greatest things that I've ever been able to establish as a New Yorker and as an entrepreneur, because they've helped lift me along the way when things don't necessarily go right.
And Justin, let me add to that, because not everyone has those relationships that Tiki has, obviously, but it is important for you to understand that education and the knowledge for those that are trying to start businesses is out there. We just have to seek that. And again, that's why having a financial advisor is so important. JPMorgan Chase, we just announced a $30 billion initiative to help really advance racial equity across the country. And when you think about that, it enables small business owners to have access to capital, but have access to education as well. So when you think about learning about the pitfalls of starting a business, making sure that you're learning how to diversify your portfolio, making sure you learn how to pay yourself first so you don't get into those situations where, okay, now the business may be stumbling and my personal life stumbles along with it. I think those are the things where it's so important to understand your resources, work with a financial advisor to be able to connect you to those resources. Even if you may not have those personally, you have access to those. And that financial education is so critical. And I think that's something that as a Black community, we absolutely have to continue to share and invest in, is ensuring that everyone understands where those resources are and to do the work to understand so you don't make the same mistakes that many have made in the past.
Yeah, Barry, and again, that is such a great point, because I don't know if a lot of black entrepreneurs in our communities realize that. I don't know if they realize that there are resources for them, that there are these relationships that are necessary. They're there. Black people are prideful, right? We've always been this way, going, from the struggle from hundreds of years ago. We're a prideful people, and sometimes we don't want to seek help. It's like, I can do this myself. It's okay. It's right. It's actually beneficial and better for you to partner with someone and to know that JPMorgan Chase has resources like this. That there are opportunities to be greater than what you think you are. It's fantastic. I love to hear that.
And gentlemen, when we talk about the topic of Black entrepreneurship, Black business owners are more likely to have to use their own money to fund their businesses. I've seen this up close. My wife runs a successful marketing firm. In the past, she's had to do that. How can Black entrepreneurs, as they go through this process, ensure that their long-term goals stay on track? And that's for you, Barry.
Yeah, look, like we just talked about, I would say you've got to make sure that you leverage the resources that you have, but you also have to have diversification and making sure that you're working with advisors, looking at your resources to build that wealth, but diversify the streams in which you are using your own capital to be able to build whatever business entity that you're trying to grow. So the one thing that we oftentimes do, we put all our eggs in one basket, and at times that causes trouble. And I think listening to Tiki and hearing how he's built his wealth, you see there are a lot of different businesses, a lot of initiatives. You learn from some, and then you succeed in others, and you may not have as much success, but the diversification, I think, is the key. And leveraging and using the financial education and knowledge to be able to understand where you can get access to capital and understand the knowledge of how you minimize your own personal costs. And don't forget, Justin, think about the tax implications and understanding the benefits and rules that are associated with how that affects your business. Those are all important things. FINRA just recently announced a statistic that showed that 25% of Blacks had taxable investment accounts compared to 47% of whites. And you started off this call and you talked about, we know that we've started off in our community with an unfair advantage. There's no doubt about that. The racial divide and inequality is real. So that's understandable. But now it's time for us to start to make that change, and having conversations like this, making sure that we have access to stories like Tiki's and resources like JPMorgan Chase, and bringing that to the masses in our community. That's how we're going to be able to make sustainable change. But we have to keep the dialogue going and make sure that people are learning from each other. And there's no need to recreate the wheel when you have a playbook that can show you and lead you to that success.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, Barry, we've seen over the decades in this country moved from a manufacturing country to a service country where, small businesses can thrive because there's opportunities, right? There's, what does my community need, or what does this realm that I'm walking in, what's needed right now? And the opportunity to create something that's needed is always there. You just have to see it and have the resources, more importantly, to go start it. Right? One of the hardest things for me when I first started a business was, man, I played football for a decade. How am I going to start a business? But I found the right partner that helped me start it. And once it gets in you, you realize how all the machinations work and the process works, and you really can be successful. And I think it's a confidence thing. It's like, I can do this. You just need to get the start.
All right, gentlemen, we've got less than 5 minutes to go. I'm getting that cue from the producer. I wanted to shift real quick to retirement planning. This is not easy on anybody. And Tiki, as you know, professional athletes have their own unique hurdles. Yes. Planning for retirement. So talk about some of those hurdles and what athletes and people with wealth can do to try to overcome them.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for retirement planning is be aware of your 401k, how your employer matches. In the NFL, it was a great deal. If you put the max in, they were matching it five times. I mean, it was amazing in the NFL. And so know the plans, and then know how the portfolio is going to be managed, and think about when you potentially might want to take it out. So for me, I knew I was always going to be doing new things and starting new businesses and becoming, a more diverse person. So I have a very conservative portfolol. It's not aggressive. I'm not looking to make quick returns. It's just let the market play itself out. It may be frustrating to look at it on a day in and day out basis, but I need to look at it on a year in and year out basis. And so find your risk tolerance, and I think an advisor will help you do that and find your station in life. But it's really about making sure you have all of those resources and maximizing them to your best of your ability.
Barry,
I'd love to add on that, because I think Tiki's spot on. There are a couple of things. There's often risk aversion of when I should invest or when I should get into the market. There's never a good time to try and time the market. I can guarantee you, if anyone had that, they'd be making a whole lot of money. But at the end of the day, you should get invested and start to get invested. And whether it's a small amount or a large amount, whatever you're comfortable with, what's your risk tolerance, as Tiki talked about, you need to start. And then you stay invested. You stay invested over the long haul. The cycles of the market, the ups and downs, at the end of the day, if you stay invested, things will normally turn into your favor. And stay away from removing those funds and knee-jerk reactions. When you think about the long-term focus on your goals, it is about building wealth. And remember, things compound. So I love Tiki's point about whatever vehicle that you have, the 401ks, and he had talked about 529s, you are investing in your future, you're investing in your goals. So start early and stay away from those funds. He had mentioned his wife took a portion of his paycheck, and made sure that we just didn't touch it. It's not available for us. And after a while, that starts to grow. And that turns into sustainable, real money that will help you towards whatever those long-term objectives are, particularly retirement. So I would tell you, start early, stay invested, understand what your risk tolerance is, but make sure that you're building that, because that compounding effect over time, what you may be thinking today is small, will turn into something substantial in 5, 10, 20 years down the line when you're ready to retire.
Thank you, Barry. And gentlemen, we're at time. Appreciate your time today. Thank you to the Black Enterprise team and the JPMorgan Chase team. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to Justin, Tiki, and Barry for sharing information critical to increasing Black wealth, and to JPMorgan Chase for their sponsorship of the session. Next up is a conversation that promises to be a masterclass on leadership excellence, the cost to be the boss, lessons in leadership.